thank everyone for coming out this evening to this historic space, this Frank Lloyd Wright Auditorium, built in 1905, and after the rise, our black people started moving in the neighborhood. So this is a historic spot. We can see Du Bois speaking on the stage, Robeson, Richard Wright, and many of our great iconic Gwendolyn Brooks, Harold Washington. The list goes on, and their photos are in the lobby when you come in. So this is sacred space, and we're glad you're here to kick off this occasion for Black History Month and paying tribute to Dr. Carter G. Woodson with one of our great young, he ain't young no more, but he's younger than me. I was young when I met him, and he was younger. But before we get started, I think it's appropriate just to have a moment of silence for the tragic loss of Brother Kobe Bryant and his daughter and the other 7 people who were lost in that helicopter. And also we need to acknowledge today, January 31st, 1919, Jackie Robinson was born. So I would like us to just have a moment of silence for Kobe, his daughter, and all of our great ancestors. Thank you so much. So the Center for Inner City Studies that transitioned into the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies in 2004 is moving into its 54th year. September 8th. I used to work here, but every now and then they let me come back. But September 8th, 1966, under the leadership of Don Smith and many others, what was known at that time as the Center for Inner City Studies rolled out in a raggedy building. $290,000 because Cecil Partee maneuvered the state to take over this building. This was the Abraham Lincoln Center. So it's a lot of history. So in these almost 54 years, we've had a lot of partners, the Carruthers Center, and one of our great community partners is the Black United Fund of Illinois. So my lifelong friend, Henry English, when he rolled out the Black United Fund, recruited many of us to sit on the board. Andy Thompson, Harold Pates, the list goes on, to help him roll out the Black United Fund. Well, as you know, Henry made his transition in March of 2016. So we had to find a new executive director. Henry used to teach here. We did all kinds of hookups between the Carruthers Center and the Black United Fund over many years. So I'm delighted I'm still on the board. They let me sit on the board and run my mouth every now and then. And the younger generation has taken over. Carl West, where are you? Where's Carl? Did he leave? He's on the phone somewhere? Well, anyway, he's the new chairman of our board, Carl West. Everybody knows Carl West. So I'd like to bring before you now our executive director who's keeping the tradition and expanding the work of 35 years. Were any of the staff of the Black United Fund? There's Iris and Hazel. Y'all kind of, the engine. We got. So I want to bring Ms. Carolyn Day. She's kind of like a double agent because she's also a member of Dr. Wright's used to be church. He's chairman, pastor emeritus. You see him in the back over there. So we have a lot of but it's always nice when the black community, when the African community comes together, because we're so interrelated and interconnected. It's a good thing, because we need to be interrelated and interconnected to get out of some of these challenges we face as African people, not only in this country, but throughout the world. So I bring before you now our great executive director of the Black United Fund of Illinois, Carolyn Day.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad Worrell. So welcome to the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies and the Black United Fund of Illinois' Black History Month kickoff lecture. As he said, I am Carolyn Day, the Executive Director of the Black United Fund of Illinois, and I just want to acknowledge our board member, Bernard Williams, who's here, and Vincent Williams, who's here. The founder of the Black United Fund of Illinois, the late Henry L. English, commenced an educational and community partnership between both institutions. And so this reciprocal alliance resulted in student referrals, internships, employment opportunities, collaborative and community and professional development events. For those of us who is considered to be a triple threat, meaning a Chicago native, a former Chicago public school student, and proud alums of HBCUs, today is definitely a celebration, similar to what we would experience at HBCUs at the Student Union caucus meetings, not to be confused with pseudo-intellectual discussions on the yard. But this is definitely a moment for us to honor all of our mentors by proudly demonstrating our academic astuteness and flossing our intellectual prowess. More importantly, holding true to our lifelong assignments to being socially responsible, a commitment to cultural awareness through our thought-provoking conversations, ensuring that the once so-called Negro will no longer be miseducated. So under the new leadership of Dr. Evans here, the director of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, we look forward to continuing this historical affiliation. So again, on the behalf of the Black United Fund of Illinois Board of Directors and staff, we thank you for joining us this evening.
So in 1950, I was 9. I walked by this building. I didn't know what it was. I was on my way to the Wabash Y. And I had no idea that years later I'd be hired to be what they call a professor. And after 2 weeks of employment as a professor, Dr. Carruthers came and said, I want you to be the chair. I'm going to Africa. He gave me a bunch of folders and said, get to work. So 40 years later, it was enough work, and I decided to go into a new life called Professor Emeritus. But I was here for 40 years. But I was really here since 1950, if you understand black time. But during the interim, for a minute or two, we had an acting director, Dr. Scott, but God sent us a great sister, Dr. Andrea Evans, who really a West Side sister, and as I've gotten to know her, she's a Proviso East sister, and you know, she knew Doc Rivers when she was in high school. She liked sports, so you know we started getting along. She know a little something about track and field, and her daughter was a great Big Ten triple jump champion, so we got to be real tight in the process. Athletics has a way of bringing Negroes together. But we're honored that Dr. Evans stepped in. She's quite a leader in keeping the tradition of the Carruthers Center alive. And just recently, she discovered that they wanted her to be the acting dean of the College of Education until they find a permanent dean. And I just hope they don't make her permanent, but you know, you never know what's going to happen, because I need her, we need her here. So if they make her permanent, we have to have a campaign that she still be running here. Okay. So, and I hope they are listening. But without further ado, Dr. Andrea Evans, who's now in her second year of being the director of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Study and also an acting dean of the College of Education.
Thank you all. First of all, I just started my third year here. So on behalf of Northeastern Illinois University and the Carruthers Center, welcome here for this really wonderful occasion. I really want to thank Carolyn and Conrad for having the vision for this event. We talked about it all of about 20 seconds, and it was a deal. It was a no-brainer. I'm honored to have Dr. Carr here. We just met recently, and I'm trying to get my niece out there at Howard, who was just in his class. This past fall, she came home at Thanksgiving. I said, "You got to go see Dr. Carr." She said, "I'm in his class." I said, "Well, go tell him you know me. I mean, he's trying to take care." And so I got to call her tonight and said, "You haven't gone to see Dr. Carr yet," and tell him you're my niece. So I am honored. I just want to say this. I've only known Conrad since I started here, and it's been really a wonderful collaboration. And I think that what people like me recognize and honor, I recognize and honor my elders. I recognize and honor what they've done, what they bring, and I try to get it from them. There's nothing like learning from and sitting at the feet of people who are great and who have done great things. And so I take that and honor that, and he knows that. I mean, I make no bones about that. I'm not one of those people that think I come in and I don't need you anymore, and that's not the case, and it never has been, and it never will be. So I'm always honored to be here, and I'm really honored to host this event and to have you all here. This is a historical place, and you know that. The greats have been on this stage, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois. We actually have articles that listed the day that they came here to do a talk on this very stage. Of course, Paul Robeson and many, many others. So I always feel like I'm breathing rare air when I stand up here, and it's just really an honor to be a part of continuing the legacy of education, advocacy, and activism that has taken place in this building, and I'm happy to be here with all of you, and I hope you all enjoy this evening like I know that I will. Thank you.
There are a lot of people in this room that I know your faces. Some of you I know personally, like Arthur Hirams, who played ball with me in high school, who here tonight. I'm glad because he usually doesn't come to events like this, but he's a lifelong friend. Bennett Johnson, who's in his 90s, who was a colleague. He was a colleague of Harold Washington at Roosevelt, along with Gus Savage and Herman Gilbert, that actually rolled out the black independent political movement the day that Daley was elected in 1955, who has mentored me in politics, who lives in Evanston and is still trying to tell me what to do and what I'm doing wrong. But he's a great. Bennett, raise your hand. So there are a lot of people in the house, and I'm going to try to do this real quick. We have the Comedic Institute people in the house, and their leader, Professor Yvonne Jones and Sister Eve. All the KI people, raise your hand. All the KI people, raise your hand. And the KI people are double agent people because they're also ASCAC people. So the ASCAC KI people, raise your hand again. And then I know we have a lot of CCICS people in the house, either former alumni, students, staff, faculty. Just wave your hands a minute. Let me see all these people. Of course, the Black United Fund people in the house, we've already acknowledged them. You can raise your hand again, Bernard and what have you. And then we got the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright. His name came up on my phone. I said, oh, Lord, what did I do now? So I answered, and he said, is Greg speaking tonight? I said, yes, Reverend. He said, well, I'm coming. So the Trinity United Church of Christ. So a brother snuck in there on me. I didn't know he was the company he usually calls, but he is indigenous to Chicago, so I guess he can come home whenever he gets ready. Tony Browder, who's done some great work. And then all the Cobra people is in the house. Mazariki, the female co-chair of Cobra. Cam Howard, the male, all the Cobra people, just raise your hand. All the Cobra people. Lionel Kimball, have you gone? Lionel is the vice chair of the Association for the Study of African American History that Dr. Woodson founded. He was here, and I don't know if they, oh, Lionel, there, stand up. There you go, Lionel. Then we got Obari Cartman, and he got a whole posse of young people. I can't keep up with them. And there's so many other people. I mean, I see Hunter Adams out here. I see a whole lot of people. I see Mbuzi. I met at a Black Power meeting in the 60s. You know, there's just a lot of people up in here. And it's good when African people come together on the same beat, on the same night, to kick off a significant and historical occasion. We all know people used to make me angry. Why do we only have a week? Well, shut up. What did you do? We know Woodson had a strategy. We know we're supposed to study our history 365 days a year, so shut up. So anyway, I'm not the main bill, but I could be. But that's another story. So I want to introduce one of our students, Dr. Kamal Rashid, that we're quite proud of, who earned his master's degree here in inner city studies in 2002. Dr. Rashid went on to earn his PhD from the University of Illinois in 2009. Dr. Rashid is a professor at National Lewis College. I tried to get him here, but that's another story. He's also a member of the Kemetic Institute. He's also a part of ASCAC, and he's also, what I guess, a martial arts. I'm kind of scared of him because he stays in shape and all that. But he's a beautiful brother. And I could think of no one this year to introduce Brother Greg than Dr. Kamal Rashid.
Hotep. I want to say Asante Sana to Dr. Worrell for that nice, wonderful introduction. In African tradition, it's always appropriate. It's always customary that when we speak before a gathering, that we ask permission of our elders to speak. So may I have permission for my elders to continue? Asante Sana, thank you very much. I want to introduce. My task is to introduce Dr. Greg Carr, and I want to introduce him in the vein of something which he often refers to in his speaking and writing, which is this idea of intellectual genealogy. You all know what genealogy is, right? All of us, none of us are here absent the contribution and presence of those who came before us. All of us are in a stream of continuity, from our ancestors to us to our progeny in the future. Does that make sense? So all of us are situated in the stream of continuity. Dr. Carr, in talking about this topic, and Dr. Carr himself is in fact in this stream, and it's actually very appropriate that we're talking about Dr. Carter G. Woodson on such an occasion as this, because Dr. Carter G. Woodson is profoundly significant to the work that occurred in this building, in this space, in this city. There are a couple of interesting things, two things that I want to highlight, which are of notable importance with respect to Dr. Woodson. First is his emphasis on the restoration of our history, right? One of the things that Dr. Woodson emphasizes the importance of us reclaiming our historical sense of who we are as an African people, our continuity with respect to who we are on this side of the water and those folks on the other side of the water. but he also provided, which has probably been the most profound contribution with respect to the work that has occurred in this space, is his critique of the black intellectual. Yes, sir. Right? His critique of the process of what is called education and its impact on the consciousness of African people. Because this idea would have a profound impact on the work of another person who would emerge in that stream, in that genealogical stream, a man named Jacob H. Carruthers. Right? So, of course, all of you all are familiar with Dr. Woodson's classical work, The Miseducation of the Negro. There is not a black person on the planet Earth who should not be acquainted with that book. Dr. Woodson was writing that book with a crystal ball that enabled him to peer into the future quite clearly, because in the 1930s he effectively grasped the condition of black folks today. There are a couple of points that he raises, that Dr. Carruthers raises, that I want to raise up again, dealing with this idea of genealogy. Dr. Carruthers dealt with a critique of black intellectuals. In fact, he was very consistent in his critique of black intellectuals. One of the points that Dr. Carruthers raises, and he raises this throughout his works, is the failure of black intellectuals to declare their independence from European thought. In fact, if you really understand what he was writing, if you really understand his point, basically he argued that too many black intellectuals have been raised in the abusive orphanage, which is white academia. They are orphaned from their community. They are orphaned from a sense of who they are, but most importantly, they are orphaned from the future that we ourselves could establish if only they could reclaim their minds. So Dr. Carruthers' critique of black intellectuals was important because it was quite instructive, particularly for brothers like Dr. Carr. Because Dr. Carruthers presented us the example of what we must not be if we desire to be free, but he also articulated that which we must become. Some of us have attempted to model ourselves after that. Dr. Greg Carr is an exemplar of this. His emphasis on intellectual genealogy is important because it reminds all of us that none of us stand on an island. It reminds us of the importance of us maintaining a coherent connection between ourselves and those who came before us, and that our work, our teaching, our scholarship has the capacity to inform those who come after us. Therefore, we are bound up in a stream of intergenerational obligation. One of the things that Dr. Carr talks about, which is very important in his work, the importance of black intellectuals situating themselves in this tradition. He reminds us that none of us need be orphans. None of us need be orphans. None of us need to be estranged from African thought. This is important because one of the things that we understand when we study our traditions, when we study our history, you find that in order to be our best selves, we have to be who we are. And Dr. Carr emphasizes this. He compels us, in fact, to declare intellectual maroonage, to be intellectual maroons, right? Because, see, the Maroons escaped from the plantation. But what's important about the Maroons is that they did not just leave a plantation to get off the plantation, they fled to restore the African way, to live on their own standards, to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining and sovereign. But most importantly, the Maroons, having secured their freedom, waged war against the institution of enslavement. They did as much as they could to free their sisters and brothers who still labored on the plantation. They provided a shining beacon of what we could be if we were to reclaim our minds. And so when Dr. Carr talks about this idea of being intellectual maroons, it is a call. He is speaking with the voice of the ancestors, reminding us of the journey that lays ahead, reminding us of the path that we have to follow, reminding us of the work that must be done. And so Dr. Carr brings a powerful message, especially given where we are, and especially given the stream of intellectual genealogy that he has been so steadfast in his representation of. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Greg Kamathi Carr.
Everyone. Of course, Conrad doesn't ask, he gives commands. So I want to thank the center. I want to thank the fund and the animating force for me being here, of course, my parents and the creator. I want to thank Brother Worrell, who could easily be giving this talk. In fact, I think probably should be giving this talk. Because I'm not going to come to Chicago and talk about Carter G. Woodson to people who know him very well and know him intimately coming through these spaces, as much as I am going to talk just a little while, and hopefully we'll have a conversation. I feel particularly excited tonight because it's always very humbling to come into this building. Mama Ife knows this. when hang out with Jacob Carruthers, just being around that guy, man, bless you. And but to come with him, to ride over here and to sit, might have to. Okay. The years, so much has gone on in here, and I wasn't expecting. Right now, we're talking. He shared an email he had sent before, something he had asked Tony Browder to look at, and I look over here, go Tony, we were just talking about you, brother. So, and I believe Tony helped me. I think it was the ASCAT conference after you first really established contact, working on the ACER Restoration Project, where you unveiled that project right here on this stage. 2009. Yes, sir, 2009. And so, I mean, that's just one out of so many different experiences that, I've been fortunate enough to participate in here. And tonight, I think it makes it much more powerful because and it's good to be with family. Best to be with family on a night like this because this is Black History Month Eve, and so we get to be black together and get close to February the 1st. And that's, it don't get any better than that. So many, my old running buddies are here, and I think, I see, anytime I see Deborah Hurd, we were, as Dr. Eleanor Traylor says, of her friend Toni Morrison, who worked with her on the faculty at Howard, we were kids together at Tennessee State. Before I ever took a class in college, we were in the marching band together. Anytime I see Deb, we go all the way back, which isn't far at all to many people in here, but I suppose that's, and yet Chicago always reminds you that you think you old till you get around people who, brother, you start talking about Harold Washington, and they're like, wait a minute, hold on, you don't look nothing near 90 years old. My mom's 93, and so I would have to keep her away from you, brother, because you look like, but I'm saying, man, yeah, it's about Chicago, but you Negroes don't, it's something, I think it's probably because you're so black. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to, I hope, have a conversation, because I promise you. Should I just do that and turn this one off? All right. Let me take this off my belt then. And turn that off. Yes, sir. Brother Williams, I'm thinking about you, man. We were over at Kennedy King, I guess the new campus. We were there, and I was digging through that book you wrote back in the day, man, talking about, this whole question of black power and education, and thinking about Harold Pates. And it seems like in some ways, everything always comes back to Chicago. And that's not even an exaggeration. You start flipping through Negro Digest or Black World, and you start realizing, come on, yeah, you smile because you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But for those of us pre-internet, for us to get a document, I'm fortunate because I was young enough to know that you needed Black World, you needed Negro Digest, and of course now you can't afford them because these white folks done got them and they're gonna put them on, and sell them for all this ridiculous amount of money. So if you have them in your possession, hold on to them. But anyway, I'm gonna go too far afield because what I want to do is talk a little bit and then really get into a conversation, because there are some people in here who might not know who the rest of these people in the room are, and I'm hoping that there will be a lot of conversations so that we can kind of have a conversation, because I don't want to be in the middle of this conversation by myself. Certainly, I'm not going to come and talk about that. We got to pay, of course, respect, Babali, to these cats. Oh, yeah, man. We were, of course, you all can see, this is our journal, well, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations journal, which in many ways is patterned after the work of the Kemetic Institute in all the essential ways, really, and the long art. And of course, you can see this is our latest issue. We're working now to get another one out. That's, of course, Jacob Carruthers receiving the staff of elderhood from John Henry Clark. There's Conrad back there in the back. And just a powerful moment. And of course, the great Anderson Thompson. Absolutely, please. I regret that I wasn't able to get here for the unveiling of the photograph, but when you walk through that lobby and see Osborne's work, and you see Dr. Carruthers and you see Dr. Thompson and all the other photographs in here, this is truly a remarkable sacred space. And I'm saying that in front of people who know that's true because you've been so many other places. When you come in this place, the spirit of these ancestors is strong, and the spirit of the people who continue that work is strong. So we give respect to them and everyone else associated with them. So let's start with very quickly with our brother. That was me a couple of years ago. I think, actually, no. When Baba J, when they established, Chicago State established the first Jeremiah Wright Distinguished Lecture. That was the. I said, take me over to the Vivian Harsh. I want to go see Carter G. Woodson playing these papers. So that's me being very happy and corny, but yes, because Woodson rarely smiled, but I'm out there in front of the place because Chicago has an embarrassment of riches, and that Harsh collection is so important. And I know people in here know that, but there may be 2 or 3 who might not know that. Go over to that regional library. In fact, I think this was dedicated on the 100th anniversary of the association, which was, of course, founded here. And so you come in the lobby and you see that, and in fact, there's Harsh. That's her, ain't it? Yeah, and in fact, if I get a picture wrong, it's about 150 people in here to be like, nah, that ain't who that is, brother. But I know that, and of course, there's Woodson. He got his tuxedo on, still not smiling, though. I mean, he did say that no one could ever outwork him. I mean, the man did work in a coal mine until he was 18 years old before he could go to high school. It's really quite something. And of course, it was here, while here, and of course, we know he took graduate degrees from the University of Chicago, but it was while here that he started the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History at the time at the Wabash Avenue Y. And like Conrad said, he could walk you through everybody ever stayed in that YMCA, probably. And this is just a representation of an ad that used to be in the Negro History Bulletin that would run regularly, also Journal Negro History. And it talks about the fact that it was organized by Carter Godwin Woodson in Chicago, September 9, 1915, with George Cleveland Hall, W.B. Hartgrove, J. Stamps, and Alexander Jackson, the 4 out of many invited by the founder to participate in this organization. And there are a lot of us solid heads. We were talking before we came in here that the academics have rediscovered the association, but it was always us. And I'm always grateful to you, brother, and grateful to you all as the new generation takes that mound up. And as people figured out they can now make a profit off of black people, now they want to write books about black people and not really have much contact with black people. So you might run into them at the archive, but you won't run into them at a meeting on a Friday night like this, even though they might try to write about this place. I'm telling y'all that now, because when they show up with their tape recorder trying to interview y'all, send them back to the young people in this room and tell them, no, this is not just an academic exercise. This is a movement, and it started as a movement. Carter Woodson always did that, yes. And of course, we know that Dr. Woodson was very adamant about the fact that he wasn't going to take money with strings attached. And we think about in these days, we have crowdsourcing and internet and all these things you can do, GoFundMe and things like that. Woodson didn't have any of that, but he'd take a nickel from a child. But you know what? When she gave that nickel up, she became a member of something much bigger than her. And he knew that the money was just a way to signal a commitment to a thing bigger. And so even though the last 10 years of his life, every year he owed more than he had. So when he passed away in 1950, April, at the house on 9th Street, the man didn't have any money. He had given his life, sacrifice, as he always talked about. He was willing to sacrifice. Even though that was the case, Carter Woodson understood that his riches overflowed, because his riches were really about the human community. And of course, that's the statue that Tony and I and all the folks who live in D.C. pass all the time on 9th Street, right there in the block, in the island between the Phyllis Wheatley Y, where Dr. Woodson used to take his meals, and his restored house. The Park Service has restored it. The back of that statue reads, "Truth comes to us from the past, then like gold washed down from the mountains." It's a beautiful statue. Carter Woodson there. For those handful that may not have seen it in person, you owe it to yourself to see it. But now that's in the house. I love the fact that the National Park Service employs so many young black people at the black sites. And that's not an accident. There are a couple of sisters who are very critical to that. One works at Howard, Elizabeth Clark Lewis. Libby always training these young people, particularly young sisters. So you come in, they laugh, and we're on the second floor there, And this brother and I standing actually in Carter Woodson's bedroom. That's where he made transition in April 1950. It's always good to see the fact, and they take great pride in being the custodians. One of my former students now here pursuing, about to finish up her PhD, LaShaya Howie. She used to, when we would bring students from New York African Burial Ground, you see her come out with her ranger outfit on, say, okay, and I'm gonna walk y'all through this burial ground, because I'm not just an academic, I'm a custodian for these ancestors. And so when you have a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old for the first time coming on a site like that and see somebody look like her or look like him with that kind of expertise, but that kind of spiritual investment, that's a direct extension of community. And it welcomes us into the possibilities. So you just took a piece of that, but let's go to Dr. Woodson. There he is. That's close to a smile, I guess. Just saying Philly, the young bull. This is the last editorial that came out before he made transition in something called the Negro History Bulletin, which he started in the late 1930s. This is the March 1950 issue. It was a difficult, man, that was a tough spring on black people. Charles Hamilton Houston, the one they said is the man who killed Jim Crow. Charles Houston passed away in Freedman's Hospital that spring in April. Charles Richard Drew turned his car over between D.C., headed to Tuskegee for a medical conference because Drew's students didn't have the money for the train, and Drew said, I'll drive and y'all can ride with me, and fell asleep at the wheel because he had done a full round at Freedman's Hospital, taught his classes, and he was accused, so he spoke to the fraternity that night. And when Du Bois wrote his obituary, Du Bois said, one of the lessons we learned from the life of Charles Richard Drew is when you're tired, go to sleep. It's a tragedy. But Drew died. And in fact, one of Drew's associates, who also knew Dr. Woodson very well, came over to Carter Woodson's house on 9th Street, and they let him in because the secretaries knew that he knew Woodson well. So they said, well, he's coming to check on Dr. Woodson, because Woodson hadn't been feeling well. Dr. Woodson used to go down to Union Station in D.C. and mail off everything. He did it personally. Then he would stop and get him a meal. He loved to eat, and then he would come back to the house. But he had lately started deputizing and sending other people to go, and that's how they know, and this guy is not feeling well. The doctor's like, your heart's weak, man. You got to take it easy. So they let this brother in because they thought, well, he's coming to check on Woodson. The man went upstairs and conveyed to Carter Woodson the news that Charlie Drew had died. And then, not 48 hours later, Carter Woodson passed away. Also, Luther Porter Jackson, very important figure in Virginia, one of the men who collectively were known as Woodson's boys. These were the graduate students that Woodson took in and gave them money in the summertime to go and sell the books that they were publishing out of the house on 9th Street, the Associated Publishers, those books. And Luther Porter Jackson, Alrutheus Ambush Taylor. I'm like, man, your mama gave you a great name. Fisk University, the Negro in Tennessee, Alrutheus Ambush Taylor. That's a name need to be, I want somebody to be named Ambush again. I was like, we need an Ambush name. Cold-blooded scholar. These are Woodson's boys, though. They get in the car, and a guy who was younger than Woodson but older than the others, who they still lumped with them, and I think he probably bristled to the day he died, and that was Charles Harris Wesley. Charles Wesley, another one of the guys, man, that ran it. So, yeah, this was the piece that was published the month before he passed, and you see the title, No Study, and consequently, no celebration. So this first part right here, I just blew it up over here. It's evident from the numerous calls for orators during Negro History Week that schools and their administrators do not take the study of the Negro seriously enough to use Negro History Week as a short period for demonstrating what the students have learned in their study of the Negro during the whole school year. These mischievous orators, as it has been said again and again in these columns, have no message which they can connect with the celebration of Negro History Week, but the only thing on the Negro which they know is the traditional discussion of the race problem and how it has been or can be solved. This is 1950. This is before they really started charging the big honorariums to come and talk about the race problem. It all starts in the morning. This is the 31st of February, and tomorrow we'll have Green History Month for some of my colleagues who will collect huge checks from black student unions at white schools. You know, I mean, I got a nephew here tonight. Like, you know, when we were in school, his mom and I, we were at Temple. Come on, man, just when you get paid in February, because them black students is hungry to hear. And for $15,000, I will come and tell you. This is the 90s. I don't know what them Negroes is charging now. I don't even ask them. I just laugh. But Woodson has already peeped the game in 1950. He's like, y'all got this thing exactly backward. But I don't need to belabor on this. I want us to have a bit of a conversation. And Conrad, as he said, I already said this. We know it's 365 days a year. I'm going to keep going. This is Du Bois on Woodson. Now, we know Du Bois was the first Negro to get a PhD from Harvard, and Woodson was the second. And by the time Woodson's boys came along, it was still south of 10, and the country had PhDs. And when Charles Wesley got his from Harvard, and Luther Jackson got his, and that was around the same time that a sister got hers, the great Anna Julia Cooper, who, you know, is just a beast in all kind of ways. She wrote her dissertation on the Haitian Revolution in French. Yeah, but at any rate, Du Bois and Woodson, two very different people. Du Bois's ancestors who had been enslaved were in the distant past. He grew up in Massachusetts. Woodson, of course, his mother and father came out of enslavement. More on them in about 5 minutes. But Du Bois liked to write everybody's obituary. This is the funny thing about this guy, man. Because he lived a long time. And he would just make sure that he would write everybody's obituary. And he and Woodson had a little bit of beef. And y'all don't have to read this. I'm just going to clip this a little bit out, and I'm going to clip that top part. I love this right here. Carter Godwin Woodson, who died in Washington on April 3rd at the age of 71. He was actually 75, writing fast, Du Bois. Illustrates what race prejudice can do to a human soul and also what it is powerless to prevent. I remember the first time I read those words. I was a graduate student at Ohio State. By then, Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization Negroes had wrecked my dream of being a lawyer. And I went back to study black stuff. There's people in my family still not forgiving y'all, but it's all right, though. They'll get over it. But my first semester of graduate school, this was the fall of 1990, and I was at the library. Nobody was in the library. Finals are over, papers turned in, everybody just kind of, chilling, gone home, whatever. And I'm just, let me go in here. So I'm up in the Black Studies section looking through stuff, and I saw this book by Elliot Rudwick and August Meyer. Some of y'all know the book. It's called Negro History and the History Profession, where they changed the title, Black History and the Historical Profession. And the first chapter is called Carter G. Woodson as Entrepreneur. And Meyer and Rudwick basically wrote close to 400-page bibliographic essay. Everybody who'd ever written about black stuff in America, who trained them. And so when we hear, my dear close comrade and brother Kamal, talk about the fact that I talk about genealogy. I talk about genealogy because Jacob Carruthers talked about genealogy. And so when you hear us, you're hearing them. But in reading this book, it was like, this is the roadmap. And it took me a while, but I think I got everything in those footnotes, everything on every page, all that stuff. That's why I ain't got no money now. It's like, yeah, you got to get all these books, all these documents. But it starts, chapter 1, Carter G. Woodson as Entrepreneur, with this line. And when I read that line, I said, oh, yeah. What the hell? This is what intrigued me. Because, see, America turned you inside out. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But then there are certain things that it's powerless to stop if you have the will to overcome it. And so when Du Bois said that, it was a compliment. Now, that's a left-hand compliment, because we're going to talk about what that means in a minute. Because this is something he had written the year before, 1949. So that's about 14 months before he wrote this on Woodson after he passed. He said, this is Du Bois, there is in Washington a large brown man with crisp hair whom few people know, but who has miraculously made the United States of America at least once a year notice and say something about the history of the Negro race in our country. This miracle has been accomplished by Carter G. Woodson. He edits and publishes and has published for 2 decades the Journal of Negro History, which he started in 1916, the year after he started the association with those brothers right here, and Vivian Harsh and them as well, right here in Chicago. He has done this almost single-handed because no respectable foundation, no matter how many millions it has, is going to entrust a Negro with funds unless it is sure he will do exactly what it would like to have done. Slowly, it is being hammered into us that the greatest failure of America has been to reward the laboring class. Certainly no need for me to read this in a place like Chicago, when y'all go on strike, y'all be striking for real. We going on strike. It's a labor town, you understand? But it's being hammered into the country now that the greatest failure of America has been to reward the laboring class, which made this country worth building by making them the footstool of its greed and oppression. And that indeed, it is only very recently that any man dared stand up and emphasize this fact. He's saying Woodson is going to tell it straight. He's not scared of y'all. I mean, what y'all going to do? Send him back to the coal mine? He already said I can outwork everybody. I came out the coal mine. I'm not scared. And I'm not taking their money either. And one of the reasons Woodson and Du Bois didn't necessarily get along all the time is because anytime Du Bois was trying to do something, he had put a couple of nickels together from these foundations. He would go to Woodson. They had one thing in particular, this Encyclopedia of the Negro they were working on. This is in the 30s. And they had a big meeting at Howard University. It's a famous photograph on the steps. I didn't include it in these because, like I said, I want to get through these fairly quickly. But you've got Altelia Cromwell, Monroe Work from Tuskegee, the great scholar who did a lot of early work on lynching, kind of alongside or along the same time as Ida B. Wells, kind of a little bit after and then parallel to her. You had Mordecai Johnson was in that photograph. The great Boricua, the great Afro-Latino scholar Arturo Schomburg is in that photograph. And you know, that's really something because, see, Schomburg didn't go to school, but Schomburg had all the books. So you see the class tensions between people like Elaine Locke is like, yeah, you know, he got the books, so we're going to let him hang out with us. But I don't know about his English. The dude speaks 2 languages. Now, come on now. You know how we be doing people, oh, Latinos speak English. Yeah, well, you speak Spanish. I can't speak. All right, now, see, now, wait a minute. How did I get to be at a disadvantage? You understand? But even Arturo Schomburg is there. But they're there, and they ask Du Bois, where's Woodson? See, the white man is there too from the Phelps Stokes Fund. We're going to give y'all this money to do this Encyclopedia of the Negro. So Du Bois reaches out to Woodson. Woodson is like, yeah, I'm working on my own Encyclopedia of the Negro, actually. I've been working on it for quite some time. And ain't them white people, if they give you some money, bro, they're going to tell you what to do. So he never joined them. Parenthetically, I won't say this again, except to mention it this one time. The whole Encarta Africana that Skip Gates got involved with about 20 years ago with Bill Gates, and they published 5 volumes subsequently after that. At the introduction of it, they say this is the completion of the Encyclopedia Africana. Because Skip Gates, when he was trashing John Henry Clark and a lot of people in this room, it was one thing. Then people realized, wait, these black people are not listening to bourgeois Negroes. We need you to go lead them. So we switched up, and now it's Wonders of the African World and Find Your Roots and all that stuff. But called himself completing this encyclopedia. But if you talk to Ray Winbush and some other folks, they'd be like, nah, we still working on that. So let's talk about Woodson as a memory keeper. Any of y'all know this sister right here? Charlotte Mayhill Rollins. I know. Did she? This is what I'm talking about. Yes. Librarian, many years. Very good friends with Vivian Harsh. I started to just put this book in my bag, but I would have had 3 bags, you know, because I'm good for, I'll take this book. And I just take a picture of it and just show you, because some of y'all probably got this book at the house. Plus, I got one that's signed, so I'm just like, it's precious. It stays in the vault, right? But she, and in the preface of this book, she thanks, of course, Margaret Burroughs, another huge figure here in Chicago. But she writes, oh yeah, and please, applause for Margaret Burroughs for sure. In fact, there's a, some of y'all may know this young woman who's just written a book on Margaret Burroughs. It's called Bronze Venus or something like that. I can't remember. But at any rate, the reason that I thought about this book in particular is because these are little vignettes on black folks that Ms. Rollins writes for children. And often the children's books are the best books. This is her right here. Y'all know them Ebony magazine pictures. Story time for Fultz Quads, the world's only Negro quadruplets. Catherine, Alice, Ann, and Louise Fultz enjoy a special story hour conducted for them by Mrs. Charlotte Mae Rollins at Chicago's Hall Library. The 8-year-old quads were in Chicago for Bud Billiken Parade. Now, I can hear Dr. Thompson talking about that Bud Billiken Parade. I know some of y'all can, right? It's, but there she is. Listen, there has been no more important single job or people to hold that job in our whole intellectual work over the last century and a half in this country than the black women who kept the books, the librarians. Oh, no question, please. And y'all know what I'm talking about. So when that sister who used to work in this city at the Carter G. Woodson, who then went to Baltimore and worked, is now the Librarian of Congress, who would have imagined that a daughter of Sachet, the lady of the libraries, the keeper of the records, now sitting on top of the whole criminal enterprise known as the United States government. Anyway, this is another children's book. This is very good. I love this little book right here. Some of y'all probably know this book. This book came out, I think, last year. I like reading this book when they ask me to come. Will you come talk to elementary school students? I say, yeah. They have, do a read aloud. Yeah, I'm gonna bring this book. And what I'll do is I'll bring this book, and then I'll bring a bunch of other books by Carter Woodson. But this is Carter Woodson's, this book by Deborah Hopkinson and Don Tate illustrated called Carter Reads the Newspaper. This is the, I know y'all, I know Conrad, it's a bunch of y'all know who this is. If he's reading the newspaper, who is this guy? He used to read to his father, but it's not his father. But yes, he did used to read to his father. More on that in a second. Anybody know? That's Oliver Jones. Very important guy. Let's go to it. This is the Negro History Bulletin. Woodson started a journal for school teachers and children. So I got the Journal of Negro History to wage intellectual warfare. Then I got the Negro History Bulletin because I want school teachers to write up curriculum stuff. I want school children to send in their papers. Woodson, it's just remarkable to see how his mind worked. And he loved children. In fact, after he died, when Du Bois wrote that obit, in the third paragraph, he says something like, nobody knows what he did for fun. Nobody. But then when you read the Negro History Bulletin, a couple of issues after he passed, you see the school children writing to the Negro History Bulletin say, Dr. Woodson used to take us for ice cream. We would go to the house and Dr. Woodson would tell us stories and ask us riddles. And he loved the children loved him. Then the ladies at the colored YMCA, the Phyllis Wheatley Y, where he took his meals sometime, would say, they wrote in and said, Dr. Woodson would come over for dinner and he would tell us about when he was in the Philippines teaching, because he taught in the Philippines. He would tell us about when he would go to Paris, because the other thing he liked to do is eat. Woodson loved to eat. 1926, the NAACP gave Woodson the Spingarn Medal in this city. Their highest award, I think their highest award now is the Image Award. Anyway, but the Spingarn Medal, that was the big one. Ernest just got the Spingarn Medal. You give it to this is the creme de la creme of Negro accomplishment. So they gave it to Woodson in 1926, same year he started Negro History Week, and he received the award right here in Chicago. And so Charles Thompson met him in 1926 at that ceremony. Charles Thompson was the editor of something called the Journal of Negro Education. Very important journal published out of Howard University. Sterling Brown wrote in it. Charlie Houston wrote in it. They would go back and forth. Lane Locke, Montague Cobb. It didn't matter what your discipline was. They were thinking, how can we put intellectuals together to help fight racism, help fight Jim Crow, how to kill it. And so Charlie Thompson met Carter Woodson, and Woodson met him, and he says, I travel. And they start get some kind of way they got to start talking about eating and traveling. And Woodson was like, yeah, I'll be in France. And so then he said, why don't we hook up if you're going to be over there? So they meet, Charles Thompson and his wife meet Woodson in Paris the following summer. Woodson invites them to dinner. Charles Thompson says, we went upstairs in some French restaurant and nobody was speaking English. Woodson had prepared a menu that they served, a 7-course meal. They had the right wine with the right course in the meal, and everything was so delicious. And that's when we realized nobody really knows what Carter G. Woodson does. He would go off to Europe and collect books and look, research, and eat. When he passed, Du Bois said nobody knows what he did for fun. The ladies at the Y said Woodson would come to dinner and he would describe all his meals he would eat when he was overseas in intimate detail. We know who Carter G. Woodson is. He don't mess with bourgeois Negroes like you, but the regular people, Carter Woodson, man, he had a PhD from Harvard, and it didn't mean nothing. Harvard didn't get no money from Carter Woodson for the Alumni Association. And trust me, right now, they are making more profit off saying Carter G. Woodson went there than any shine Woodson got from going to Harvard. It's very important to understand. But this is where I want to go with this. This is one of the great articles in our archive. The February 1944 article by Carter Woodson, My Recollection of Veterans of the Civil War. Because Woodson worked in those coal mines in West Virginia, what is now West Virginia. He actually wrote his dissertation, defended his dissertation on the secession of West Virginia from Virginia. Because, you know, West Virginia is rocky, got mountains and stuff, not good for plantations. Virginia, of course, is the key to the criminal enterprise called the United States of America. That's where the big enslavers were, Washington, Madison, Jefferson, all that stuff. Hope none of y'all wasted y'all money on that brown-faced show called Hamilton. But you know, these Virginians, George Washington, you know, James Monroe, so forth. But Woodson worked in West Virginia, first on the railroads, then in the coal, and he would work. In fact, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to give you a little taste of it. He said, the veteran of the Civil War best known to me was my father, James Henry Woodson. He was owned as a slave in Fluvanna County on the James River, about 65 miles above Richmond, Virginia, in one of the infertile sections of worn-out hilly land. And on that side of the stream, which in its meandering aggravated the situation by leaving the alluvial soil on the opposite side of the river. The other thing they said, he had a hell of a sense of humor. Carter G. Woodson once, they said, if you weren't listening, he would have joked you out of your entire mind, and you didn't realize he'd been clowning you the whole time. I was just listening to Baba J and Conrad out there talking. I'm like, man, I would hate to get in between y'all when you start cutting. Because I'm very fortunate, as are we all, to be on the earth at the same time as Jeremiah Wright. And I've been fortunate enough to sit around just listening to him. You better listen real close, because what he just said outside of his mouth, you bleeding, you didn't even know you got cut. You know what I'm saying? But Woodson, who never had any money, Woodson once said, according to one of his secretaries, she gave an oral history before she passed away, she said, Dr. Woodson got robbed by two young guys in D.C., unfortunately, two black guys. But then, you know, black on black crime is like white on white crime. It's, you know, these are crimes of convenience. You punch the person closest to you. What about black on black crime? What about white on white crime? Because that's where you live. You know, what about the United States? That's white on everybody crime. But at any rate, but Woodson said he came back and they was, what happened? Man, I got robbed. He said, what, really? What? He said, yeah, you know, these two guys robbed me, and I must say, everyone should have that experience, because for the first time in my life, someone accused me of having wealth. It was like, man, this guy's joking about getting robbed. He said, for the first time, somebody thought I had money. It's like, everybody should have that experience. But he's saying, my father grew up on the side of the river where the dirt wasn't even good. In this situation, could make a surplus bondsman. Because of this misfortune, James Henry Woodson, his father, although of a mechanical turn, like his father, Carter Woodson, in other words, Carter G. Woodson was named for his father's father, who was a cabinet maker in enslavement, so these guys got skills, was debased to the level of a ditch digger in the employ of one James Stratton. The son, making use of his mechanical knowledge, and he goes on to say, he starts making furniture, he starts making a little bit of a profit, and then, well, I should just let him tell it. I ain't gonna tell it. I'll go on. The son, making use of his mechanical knowledge, in other words, Woodson's father, picked up mainly by contact and observation, was at this time hewing from the forest nearby some hard timber out of which he made at night rough furniture and fish traps, which he sold for pocket change. Learning that the bondsman was thus applying his leisure, Stratton came upon him in the ditch where he was working one morning and undertook to whip the employee for thus exploiting his opportunity. Ain't that just like, wait, man, what you doing with your spare time? Working? Oh, no, Remember, Freddie Douglass talks about that in his autobiography, right? They give you from New Year's to Christmas and New Year's off. And they want you to get drunk, run races, watch Super Bowl, whatever. And so, but then these people who were like tending their little patches and getting their gardens together, you gotta watch them Negroes, because they use their spare time to build. So this guy gonna whip him. Well, y'all know what happened. The employee, however, turned the scales, whipped Stratton, and rushed back to the plantation where he was owned by one Jack Tony. Seeing James returning home, Tony indignantly inquired, "What are you doing here this time of day?" "Stratton and I fell out," was the reply. Carnegie Woodson daddy said, "Stratton and I fell out." Fell out? That's the trouble now. All free, all free. Why is he saying that? The plantation owner is nervous because the Civil War has started. And he said, "You Negroes getting a little testy now. Y'all fell out? Yeah, you talking, what you mean? I ain't sent you over there. What you mean? Oh, all free. That's what you, all free, all free." No, check out what Woodson daddy say. "Yeah, we are free," came the retort. "And if you bother me, I will kill you, another devil." This is who Carter G. Woodson's daddy was. See, you can understand Woodson, y'all got to understand, say his family. The rebellious slave, realizing that he was in danger, rushed to his cabin, grabbed his best suit of clothes and a clean white handkerchief, dashed toward the woods where he quick dressed in more becoming attire and made his way as rapidly as possible toward Richmond. The story goes on, it ends like this. He gets to the Union Army, he tells them what happened. The Union Army said, "Where the guy at?" Woodson takes him back to the plantation, they whip the white dude, and he hangs with them for the rest of the war. So I'm just saying, when you see Carter G. Woodson, of course I'm not doing white people. Come on, man. My daddy was whipping white people in slavery. You think I'm on? Come on, man. But anyway, was that? Yeah. Oh, I should mention one other thing. This goes on to talk about his mother. 11 years old, they tried to sell Carter G. Woodson's mother, her mother, and two of her younger siblings, two boys, his uncles. The ones who taught him how to read and write, because his mother and father couldn't read or write. But the boys joined the Union Army and learned how to read and write, which is what a lot of people did. They would join the army to fight through enslavement, but you also could learn how to read and write, which is why that first generation come out of enslavement, a lot of them were men who were school teachers, because they had learned how to read and write in the army, including two of Woodson's uncles. But they were little boys at the time. Carter G. Woodson's mother jumped down and told the plantation owner, "Don't break up my mother and sell me." And they tried twice to sell her, but they couldn't get the price. So they ended up selling the mother and the two boys. And there's a whole nother intricate story behind it. But Oliver Jones was another veteran like Woodson's father. And when he had learned how to read, Woodson's father made Carter G. Woodson read him the newspaper. This brother right here was a Civil War veteran, Oliver Jones. He worked in the coal mine, and then he started a reading room in the parlor of his house. And he told Woodson, "Look, you read us these papers, and you can eat anything in here. Ice cream, got watermelon, all that." I mean, he writes about it in this. So Woodson's job was to read the papers, and Oliver Jones and the men who worked in those coal mines, who had disposable income, subscribed to every black newspaper they could find, and many of the white ones. Carter G. Woodson said it was Oliver Jones that put George Washington Williams' History of the Negro Race in African America in my hand. It was Oliver Jones that told me to read the book that he had on his bookshelf, Men of Mark, by William J. Simmons. I could hear John Henry Clark talking about Men of Mark. This big old thick book, every famous Negro in the country ever was, Men of Mark. Jones is like, "Read it to me," because Jones couldn't read. But Woodson said he was one of the most educated men I knew, and they were sitting there and debate. They knew everything. They knew about William Jennings Bryan. They knew about the stock market, the Cross of Gold speech, you name it. These are black men. With the young boys say, I'll read it all. And then when they didn't understand an issue, they would send Woodson, "Go research it. Come back. Tell us the rest." Carter Woodson, one of the greatest scholars ever produced in this godforsaken settler colony called United States of America, was not trained at Harvard. He was trained by Oliver Jones and the men. My recollection of veterans of the Civil War. We got to understand that. That's very important. as Hubert Henry Harrison said, when they would heckle, they would heckle him because he didn't go to school, but they said he knew more than everybody in New York. And these white boys would come down in their lunch hour on Wall Street in the 20s, heckling Hubert Henry Harrison. And one of them said, I finished Harvard. And then Hubert Harrison said, well, if you finished it, why is it still there? And by the way, why do you call it, you finished something and you call it commencement? And then so then he would just start taking them down through all the language, and then they would just like, go away. Yeah, go away, man. Me and Arthur Schomburg, we read books. I don't need no license to read a book. Away from me. So Woodson's World and Ours, very quickly. I mean, some of the books. The Education of the Negro prior to 1861. That is his first book that he published. He said, I'm going to tell y'all about all these schools we had during slavery and before the Civil War started. The mind of the Negro is reflected in letters written during the crisis. He said, send me all the correspondence black people was writing to each other, and I'll just put it in a book and publish it. Negro orators and their orations. I mean, I'm sorry. Let me apologize to people in here who have these books, because I know this is a twice-told tale, but it may be somebody here who doesn't know this. This was the speeches. They publishing all this. All these books he's publishing in the Associated Publishers. He said black people should have their own publishing company, so I'm going to publish my own stuff. I love this little book right here. I actually have a copy, African Myths, that's just like this. They republished it, Dover Edition Press, but I love this book. This is one of the books I take out to the children, little children. Because Woodson collected all these stories from around Africa, and they're like parables, these tales. And the thing about it, he edited them so none of them have endings. So you take the children through all the story, and then at the end, you ask them, how would you resolve this? Oh, it's really something. Even now, you can say, okay, well, these three guys wanted to marry this princess, and he goes through this whole thing, and they end up tricking each other, and he said, at the end, which one should she choose? But there's no answer. It's really something. Yeah, Woodson is like, I'm educating these children. Journal of Negro History, of course, we know. The Negro in our history, Woodson and Wesley. First Woodson, then Wesley came on. This was the textbook that was used in the black schools. Woodson, as we heard Kamal said, he's attacking apartheid with the cumulative weight of fact. He's not really trying to engage in hyperbole. This is going to be important in a minute as well. And he's building collective power through mass self-determined movement. I'll take $1 from you, $3 from you. I'll speak at this church. I'll go around. All the money goes to the association. I'm not taking a salary. I go to Paris and eat good food once a year for a few years, but everything else, I don't take a salary. All this, he's doing that, and that's why people trusted Woodson. Let's return to the end, Woodson's transition. Is Woodson's dream of integrating African memory into American memory possible? That's the question, really. Because here we get a little complicated, and I'm looking at my eye on the clock, and I'm kind of winding because we got to give us plenty of time to have a conversation. Woodson believed that if we wage this intellectual warfare by putting these facts out, give me all your documents. I'm going to publish the documents. Why? Because I want people to see the mind of the Negro. Meaning, we were writing letters. We don't need no William Lloyd Garrison. Black people are writing to each other in 1850 and 1840. Here it is. Okay, here, give me that speech, Henry Garnett. We're just going to publish. And Woodson would put ads in the Negro History, the Journal of Negro History saying, send us your documents. What does that mean? Anything y'all got on paper, we'll publish it. Is this guy going to take, Wesley said a guy worked 18-hour days. That was his regular work. What's my man? Arvah Strickland, another one of his boys. Arvah Strickland was the editor. Lorenzo Johnson Green is who I'm thinking about. Lorenzo Green, who wrote a book called The Negro in New England. He was one of Woodson's boys. Green worked in the summertime at Woodson House, and Green would be like, man, this guy don't sleep. He sweeps the floors, he packs the boxes, he writes the articles. I'm like, when do you go to sleep? He said, I was a coal miner. He always telling them that. Y'all know them old people that always tell you, like, they just stronger than everybody. I was a coal miner. I wish I could have been back there just to hear what the young boy, man, here he come again. He's going to start talking about that coal mine again. So break time is over. Langston Hughes worked for Carter Woodson one summer. Zora Hurston, you know that book Barracoon that everybody's talking about now? Woodson gave Zora Neale Hurston money. And some other people, Columbia gave her money too. But Woodson told Zora, go down there and collect the stories of our people. Talk to this guy, Kasula. So the book we call Barracoon that they're now going to make. I think Common is doing that, right? I think Common's, they've optioned to make it a movie, a miniseries or something like that. I'm saying that's great. Carter Woodson is financing that, so Zora Hurston and Langston Hughes and others. But Woodson's notion is if we put these facts out here, it will shift the way people look at us, the way we look at ourselves, and this society will change. That's the dream. And Negro History Week, we won't need it. He did believe at some point we can finally attack this so that it's taught thoroughly. I don't know that you can put those two things together. I don't know. This is what we're going to talk about. This is Martin Kilson's book. He became an ancestor fairly recently. This is 2012, Transformation of the African American Intelligentsia. He says in the book, this is Du Bois again. Du Bois, 1950. This is just after Woodson passed. Woodson hadn't been gone 2 weeks. He says, no white university ever recognized his work. No white scientific society ever honored him. Perhaps this was his greatest reward. Now, here's the thing, though. Du Bois kind of clowning him, too. In other words, Du Bois is saying Woodson didn't care about them. Other places he wrote, Woodson didn't care. He just went on about his work. But the other side of that is he worked in a fashion that was too much for these people to acknowledge. And he did have white scholars that collaborated with him, who would read papers at the associated meetings, so it wasn't completely isolated. But Du Bois's point is that this was a black enterprise. Now, here we are in 2020, we have to ask ourselves, is it still a black enterprise? Well, this is what Martin Kilson says. Indeed, when my age cohort of African-American high school students entered college in the post-World War II period, as I did, being the fourth generation of 20th century college-going African-Americans, some 90% of us were still entering Negro colleges. Now, every time I come to Chicago, I'm always overwhelmed with the blackness of this city. Students come and they ain't never seen no white people up close in terms of intimate relationship, classmates, and it's black as hell. And what Kilson is saying, one of the great scholars of the 20th century, is when I went to school, we was all coming out of black schools. Black kindergarten, black elementary school, black junior high school, black high school, who went to college, black college. And this is fairly recent, this shift. But what comes with the shift is the question. This is John Hope Franklin, of course, no stranger to Chicago. At Woodson's funeral, John Franklin loved Carter Woodson. John Franklin, of course, was named for John Hope, Du Bois's man. There's a John Hope school in this city, right? They're going to close it. I went by it on the bus. That's what Common's mom was the principal, wasn't it, about 10, 15 years ago? They're going to close John Hope. See, the thing about Chicago is y'all be naming stuff for black people. They closed Paul Robeson. You know, ain't but about 3 schools in the whole world named for Paul Robeson. I mean, at least you did name it. There's a Carter Woodson, right? It's closed? Okay. That's all right. Just take the white names out the schools and name the other ones. Okay, well, you're going to close this, we're going to name. But John Hope Franklin was named for John Hope, the friend of W.E.B. Du Bois. John Hope Franklin was approached by Alfred Knopf in 1946, 1947, and asked to write a textbook on Negro history. Why? Because the leading textbook on Negro history was being used in the black schools and the white people weren't getting no money. That book was The Negro in Our History by Woodson and Wesley. So they recruited John Franklin. He was teaching at St. Aug. Then he came to Howard. And John Franklin wrote a fine book. It was called From Slavery to Freedom. That's where the book came from, because white people weren't making no money out of Woodson. We need somebody to write a book. But what they didn't know was the man loved, he revered Carter Woodson. But at Woodson's funeral, they asked John Franklin, will you take up the work of Carter Woodson? John Franklin's reply, I will help in any way I can, but I cannot commit that type of sacrifice. I have other ideas for what I want to do with my life. You can respect that, but understand the role of individualism begins to creep in as Jim Crow recedes. Now you got superstar scholars who think they helping black people by writing a book 5 people read about the Garvey movement, while the Garvey movement is still alive. I have all the books. I'm going to read them for the sources, because your interpretation is absolutely useless. You wouldn't know a Garveyite if she slapped you in the face. But you're the leading scholar on Marcus Garvey. See, what happens is I'm going to pick myself. And I'm going to be generous because I'm going to help other scholars. But the community then just becomes academics. This is where the turn starts. And Kilson's thing is, when you come out of black institutions, you're committed to other black people. And ain't nobody impressed if you have a degree. So, I mean, some people very quickly get checked. You start coming in correcting people. And that's not a critique of John Franklin at all. I did not know John Hope Franklin well. Some of y'all knew him. I got a chance to speak to him a couple of times, sit with him. And you know, he and John Henry Clark, both born in 1915. Two very different trajectories. And respect to a man whose father and mother had to survive and family had to survive the Tulsa riots. Let's be clear. This is not a critique of John Franklin. What it is an example, trying to see when this thing turned into something other than what it started as. Woodson is a very important figure for this. Du Bois, who thought he was better than everybody, and was not right at all, because ain't nobody better than anybody else, and was absolutely right, because yeah, he probably was better than most people in certain things. Right? Du Bois, this is a piece that he took with him to Africa when he moved, and he didn't finish, and it was published after he passed it was all the talks he gave at black college commencements with a few other speeches put in. It's called The Education of Black People. That's how they named it. He's got a piece in there called Whither Now and Why. It's a talk he gives to social studies teachers at Johnson C. Smith University around 1960. His wife, Shirley Graham, gives the luncheon speech. He gives the dinner speech. And he asks, what's going to happen when we get these laws changed? Because they're going to change. He said, when legal equality comes, what will the aims and ideals of Africans in America be? Du Bois predicts the serial decline of education among Africans on these 2 pages of the book in his speech. He said, this is what's going to happen. If we don't have a sense of culture, if we don't have a sense of purpose beyond just getting the laws changed, this is what's going to happen. Your children are going to stop going to school. They're going to fix the curriculum so that they don't learn nothing about themselves, and then they're going to drop out because they said nothing interests them. I mean, it's like he's sitting there in the post-Jim Crow classroom. He said they're going to get them on delinquency too. I mean, he's naming it. He said, if we don't have a sense of culture, Du Bois said, I got 2 goals I've been fighting for my whole life. Number 1, the utter disappearance of color discrimination in American life. We got to get these laws changed. And this is the one we get caught up. The preservation of African history and culture as a valuable contribution to modern civilization as it was to medieval and ancient civilization. So they ain't never going to give you that. Changing the laws is not the objective, not the only one. Get your foot off my neck now. Don't you remember I'm your grandmother? Oh, you remember that, do you? All right, well, here, take this book. No. You see, the law doesn't mean anything. Y'all been watching the impeachment trials? The impeachment trials. My law students, we've been having a good time on that. I teach at the law school every Monday and Wednesday night. We've been going through all the testimony. These are people who are training trial advocates. They're going to be prosecutors, defense attorneys. They say every law, every rule of trial advocacy been broke. And this is not a trial. Because y'all saw what they did the last 2 days? Yeah, he did it, and it ain't a crime. Damn. Who said it ain't a crime? I say it's not a crime. And this worthless dude sitting up on the bench, John Roberts, who started all this mess with Citizens United, this dude is sitting there. I thought you was the Chief Justice. Can't you rule on evidentiary questions? Can't you? Look, man, I'm just sitting here reading note cards, bro. They have destroyed their democracy in the last 2 weeks. It's a beautiful thing for me. Anyway, hey, who is this dude with the pipe? I know y'all know who that is. That's Ron Bennett, no question. Sitting in Ebony Magazine headquarters. How's the building doing? Of course, that makes it valuable, brother. Hunter, you know, man, that's what they call legacy branding. That's what they do. They put all the Negroes out of the neighborhood, then put a sign up. This is the neighborhood that was once lived. This house that you can't even come past anymore was once lived in by Lena Horne. In other words, that's what they do. Yeah, they got to keep the Ebony sign, brother, otherwise it loses its value. But this is him when he was actually working there. I'm going to talk a little bit about hashtags, 1619 projects, reconstructions of miseducation, ADOS miseducation. Because I'm a descendant of enslaved people, but I'm a descendant of an African who was enslaved. And unchallenged regimes of whiteness. See, just because you made some noise don't mean you fighting whiteness. This is a little thing that we had down at the Museum of African American History and Culture. Did any of y'all go see Nicole Hannah-Jones last time she was here in Chicago? How was it? Was it? Oh, I'm sure it was. This is me giving some work to Eric Foner, Henry Louis Gates' friend. I'm putting him in check on his interpretation of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. This is the editor of the New York Times Magazine, Jake Silverstein. He the one subsidized, he was the conduit that allowed Nicole to do all that. And they sitting there like, I can't believe this Negro is doing this. I said, it's my job, because I came out of y'all. Anytime you see one of us, you see all of us. I couldn't come back around y'all if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. You asked me, this guy called me. He said, man, will you come down here and be on this panel talking about this 1619 thing? I said, no problem. So I'm like, listen, I'm all good with y'all. It's all good. I'm talking to this dude right here, because this is the guy. Phoner, labor historian, father, uncle, big guy, worked at Lincoln University, his people. He is seen as like the authority on Reconstruction. We all, know that, right? So I started with, why are y'all quoting Du Bois when you know you're not quoting his intellectual thrust? See, I see what Skip Gates is doing. Skip trying to be a fake revolutionary. I said Du Bois. No, but you ain't Du Bois. They hounded Du Bois. They arrested Du Bois when he was in his 80s. You getting paid beginning tomorrow morning. But I asked Foner about this question of whiteness. And right now we're in this exchange at this point, and you can go look on the Museum of African American History and Culture if you want to see the exchange. The question that was raised was the idea of how whiteness is created as a legal construct to extend and give people power, property, interest, and everything else. And what I had said was that after the Civil War, when they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, those of you know the Civil Rights Act of 1866, it's become prominent now because people talking about, what's my man, Byron Allen, who found out he was black because he's trying to make another $1 billion, and so therefore they discriminate. Okay, Negro, that's not how it works. You don't get to be black for just your profit. We need a channel. Can we have a live stream in here 24 hours a day? You know that, but you black for the court. Okay, all right. But at any rate, what I had said was, when you read the Civil Rights Act of 1866, it says that it extends to black people, for all intents and purposes, the right to be treated, make and enforce contracts as if they were a white man. And I said, that reaffirms whiteness as the standard of humanity. There's a legal standard of humanity. Not even white women, you get to be treated like a white man. Foner is like, well, yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, that's what it says, but I said, okay, all right, I hear you. So then why, when you see subsequent iterations of case law applying the Civil Rights Act, they extend that right to white men too? Meaning what? They have acknowledged that even white men have access to an extra legal whiteness at this point now. You see how he's looking? And I'm going to show you something. You see the rest of them? My man is like, yeah, that's who I thought this Negro is. Nicole's like, you blowing up my spot now. I thought I was revolutionary. No, because see, just because you changed the date from 1776 to 1619, you did not displace whiteness. You're still trying to fight your way into citizenship. This is the fundamental flaw. When Woodson is talking about Negro History Week, and then we talk about Black History Month, and we're talking about creating a curriculum where black people are in the middle of all of the events, be very careful about the framework we're trying to integrate ourselves into. Because if you're trying to integrate yourself into an America-only framework, you're just trying to get your way into whiteness. There's no way to displace whiteness as a domestic concept. It's just not possible. No, it's important. Because that's not what I think Woodson was trying to do, but Woodson was desperate to get our people beyond the fact that these people were saying we ain't had no history. So when he picks Douglas and Lincoln, it's a strategic move. He says Negro history is a patriotic ritual. I get it. At the same time, Du Bois is like, well, I said Lerone Bennett. That's really what I did, because I led in it with, Lerone Bennett, he wrote a book called Before the Mayflower. I know y'all love the 1619 project, but we've been dealing with Before 1619 for years. Have you ever, I told Jake this, Silverstein, I said, you take any 10-year period in Ebony Magazine from the mid-60s through the 70s, and you will see writing and analysis that is superior to anything y'all published in that magazine that Sunday in August. Have you read Lerone Bennett Jr.? And Nicole said, oh yeah, no, Lerone Bennett. She says that to her credit. Lerone Bennett really kind of sparked my imagination. She was a Black Studies major in undergrad. Says, Lerone Bennett really sparked my imagination. So this ain't no beef with her, because I think she's engaged in a subversive act. But that's not the same as a revolutionary act. It's a very different thing. So let's look at what Lerone Bennett said in The Challenge of Blackness. Lerone Bennett then turned that pamphlet into a book. Lerone Bennett said, "We are about the task of defining, defending, and illustrating blackness. This means that we are about the truth of this world. For we see blackness in America merging with the blackness and brownness of the third world and becoming the world." That's a very different thing. You're going to exceed the boundaries of the state, which is another way of saying that blackness is a truth which stands at the center of the human experience, and that all who reflect the rays of that dazzling darkness reflect the truth which is close to the truth of man, woman, people. For if truth, as Jean-Paul Sartre notes, is the perspective of the truly disinherited, then the black man, black woman, black people are the truth or close to the truth. He gave this talk in November 1969 at the first National Conference of Black Studies Directors in Atlanta, Institute of the Black World. That's a different proposition. They got Black History Month in England. Some of y'all been around the world talking at these places. I know a lot of people particularly going to England, but that's a different concept. So who controls our institutional memory? This is where the problem comes in. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go through this quick because I'm looking now, and it's almost now. Here we go. Oh, my God. Any of y'all know what that is? Wait, what's today? What is this dated? Yesterday in New York, Swan auctioned off all the art from the Johnson Building. This is the catalog. I got it in my bag. African American art from the Johnson Publishing Company. So it's in somebody's house now. Who controls our institutional memory? This is the catalog from Emory University, which appraised Carter G. Woodson's private library and papers at somewhere near $1 million, wrote the check, and then published The Mind of Carter G. Woodson as reflected in the books he owned, read, and published. They're at Emory now. These are our latest issues of the Journal of African American History, as we were talking about, published by the University of Chicago. I bought them today at the Seminary Co-op bookstore. Carter Woodson spinning in his grave. The University of Chicago is publishing my journal? Hard as I work, shit, I would have gone and got paid then. I had a PhD. I could have got paid. If I wanted to get paid, I got paid. If I wanted their imprimatur, I would have gotten it. Now, I'm saying the stuff in there, some interesting stuff. Pauli Murray, very important figure. They even got Negroes with red, black, and green, hands with their fists in the air, published by the University of Chicago. Come on, y'all. That's why, this is a complicated dude right here. He's an interesting guy. Y'all know Theaster Gates. He's y'all homie, right? That's me and him, and this is my student, Alex Mitchell. So Lachey and them know her. All the people were at Howard at the time. She was working at Schomburg at the time. She's getting a PhD in African American Studies in Cornell right now. From Philly, nice Philly gangster. They don't know who they let in, young Alex. But she's a librarian in that tradition of black women librarians. So she asked me to come up because we're going to talk about the archives. So I'm coming out now. I'm greeting Theaster because I'm like, dude, every time I come to Chicago, I go see Mr. Johnson's books. How many of y'all been over Stoley Island Art Bank? Yeah, so y'all know. At least they ain't got them books. But did any of y'all go last week when they had this whole thing on reading the black library? I wish I could have gone. Because, again, it's complicated. This dude right here, Jonathan Scott Holloway, has just been appointed the president of Rutgers University in New Jersey, New Brunswick, New Jersey. He's black. He wrote a whole book on the black intelligentsia. I've never seen Jonathan Scott Holloway at any meeting like this, any community meeting, anything like that. When I see Jonathan Scott Holloway, it's over there in that rarefied area called white academia. And I ain't mad at him. I'm just saying that's different than what Woodson was talking about. Just because you're smart and said something clever about black people don't mean you're part of a movement. We have to never lose sight of the fact that when we lose control of our institutions and our institutional memory, then our enemies will produce people who look like us unless you're looking at them. So when you see us in Philadelphia trying to do Philadelphia Freedom Schools, when we see everybody in Chicago with the African-centered education movement, Baba Hannibal, I'm looking at Mashariki and thinking about you and Kamal and Baba Hannibal always saying we're right, the Council of Independent Black Institutions. When I think about the fact that Tony has been spreading, along with his daughter Atlanta, curriculum from California to Alabama, I'm saying this is the work we have to do. We're not looking for the favor of our enemies, because if they're investing in it, as Woodson said, they got something they want. The New York Times is not publishing the 1619 Project because they're trying to help black people. They're doing it because they're losing a subscriber base. They realize the demographic is changing, and if in a minute you're going to turn away from them and build your own thing, no, we got to get them just enough. And God bless my friend Nicole Hannah-Jones, because I promise you, I swear, I hope she can pull this off, but history tells me different. History tells me that once they've used you, if you get a little bit too feisty with it, they'll take the work, kick you out, and the next thing you know, you've been used. And I know you think you got this game figured out, but trust me, 250 years of this thing kind of tells me you don't have it figured out. Woodson had it figured out. Keep your money, I'll get the nickels from Sunday school kids. Understand, that's very important. All right, together, when given a direction, the collections become a collective, because collectives aren't just about people, they're also about things. That's the aster. You gotta have your stuff. So everybody in here, and I'm guilty too, but I've been talking about that with Baba Jeremiah. I'm talking about that with Baba Conrad, because Ron Daniels was in D.C. We had a thing for him, his memoir. He just published the first volume of his memoir. And what he did was talk about all his relationships with community and organizing. And I'm looking at this group here, this community, and I'm saying everybody in here got a story need to be written down. Go find some young people and train them to just talk. Let them transcribe it. They can do that stuff now, fast. Why? Because we need to tell our own stories, because it isn't just about people. When we lose a human being who hasn't told her story, the stuff is now in our mind. And then we got an even more burden, and nobody can tell a story like the person who lived it. So our action items: encourage study, alone and together. It's a very good book Jeffrey Snyder wrote about the black history movement that Woodson started, the Carnegie Woodson clubs around the country. Recreate Oliver Jones's parlor. We had Jeremiah Wright at, I don't know, man, this dude is not going to slow down. He's embarrassing us, man. He preached Sunday morning for 2 Sundays ago at Howard. The next day, he and I had a long conversation. Really, it was really him talking, and I was sitting there asking him a couple of questions, but he was really laying out reparations, and he had brought along with him a lot of the work Illinois Trade Commission, Baba Conrad, brought along Mama Ava, a lot of the work that has come that y'all have done transnationally, and he laid it out for a big crowd at Metropolitan AME Church, which is known as the National Cathedral of the African Methodists, Freddie Douglass's home church. And so, recreate Oliver Jones's parlor. Do it at the Carruthers Conference in this building, February 14th and 15th. Bring people together to study. Go to our sites. Use the travel between as our moving classrooms. Y'all been to Montgomery? How is it? Yeah, y'all know that's a trick question by now, right? Huh? I done got into, thank you. Tragic, right? It's a mix, right? No, I am, and I'm in trouble, because in Cobra is going to be down there in Selma, no question. I know they down there, Fire Rose and them waiting. But I told our freshman at Howard, I was saying, if I could get 2 weeks clear in the summer, maybe late May, early June, and we get a couple of buses, maybe we could start from the Canada border, and we just ride down all the way down the seaboard through the South, stop, go to cheap hotels, and go to every site we can, and we study on the bus and have readings for y'all. And now they all fired, now they asking me, when we gonna do it, when we gonna do it? I said, oh, well, I'm in trouble now. Because I haven't been yet, but my thing is, I wanna go places where we talk about, in fact, these are the names of people got lynched, right, and killed. What if we had a memorial like this with all the names of the people like Carnegie Woodson's father whipped their ass? Just put their names on. I'm saying, I want to see a different kind of memorial, my God. How many more times we going to build monuments to ass whippings? We're a people, we survived. Yeah, just mercy, but can we get some just retribution? Oh, I'm sorry, don't even ask that question, because we know the answer. It's in the bloodlines of everybody in here. Half y'all ended up in Chicago because somebody whipped somebody's ass in Mississippi and had to leave. So I'm saying, where's the monument to the ass whippings? Excuse my French, I know it's a child here, but anyway. Go to our sites. Go do like we do. Larry Crow and them and KI, Comedic Institute, been going to Martin Delaney's grave every other Memorial Day for years. We're going again in May. Come on with us. We're going there. Look at this big black piece of stone with Martin Delaney's face on it. His wife is there. Their children are there. Hallie Quinn Brown is in there. Charles Young's children are in that cemetery. It's not far from here. And all the people in Chicago, I go because y'all took me, Mama Ife. I go because, Muriel, I go because y'all took me down there. And I won't miss that. Let's just flood the place out. And they got the beautiful museum down there, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Not the one in D.C., the first one, the Wilberforce one, sitting there between Wilberforce and Central State. Let's go do our rituals and use them as moving classrooms. Renew our black press. This is an important book right here. Brother Bernice Morris wrote, Carter G. Woodson, History of the Black Press and the Public Relations. He was writing hundreds of articles, Chicago Defender. He was writing all these articles in newspapers. We got to renew that. Renew our network of black educators. I know it's Chicago. Yeah, y'all clap for those ancestors right there. No question. I can hear this brother right now. He looking like, what y'all gonna do? I see y'all clapping, but what did he say, Mama? Kazi is the blackest of all. Work is the blackest of all. Final slide. You know this sister right here is a bad sister. How many of y'all read science fiction? Yeah, Deb knows. M.K. Jemison is no joke. She won the Hugo Award 3 years in a row. Her father was an artist. She just published this. She got a new comic book coming out through D.C. With a black woman Green Lantern. So this is one of her collections of short stories that came out a few months ago. How long till Black Future Month? And it's fascinating because what she's talking about is using the history to imagine worlds that haven't existed yet. And so I'll end with the word of Carter G. Woodson. And I put this up here because I'm going to tell you right now, I know Ebony does not print anymore. It's got a website, and it ain't what it used to be. But when they asked me a couple of years ago to write a little piece on the history of Black History Month, to be able to tell my mother I had an article in Ebony, that used to mean something in the black community, you understand? So to be able to say that in Chicago on the night before February the 1st, let's end with Carter Woodson. This is the quote I ended, that I started the essay with. This is Woodson. He looked like he kind of smiling. He looking at me like, hurry up. Okay. This is the meaning of Negro History Week, now Black History Month since 1976. It is not so much a Negro History Month, Black History Month, as it is a history time. We should emphasize not Negro history, but the Negro in history. What we need is not a history of selected races or nations, but the history of the world, void of national bias, race hate, and religious prejudice. There should be no indulgence in undue eulogy of the Negro. Don't feel sorry for us. The case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how he, how she, how we have influenced the development of civilization. That was the year after he started Negro History Week. So I'm gonna stop with that. 8:37. Okay. Whew. Sorry, I went longer. Conrad, the general. Okay. Can we talk now a little bit? You want to bring the lights up? Y'all bring the lights up? Sante, I'm gonna sit down. Anybody? Any comments? You coming now? I'll pick it up. That's for you. Thank you. Oh, is it on?
Testing.
That's good. Good.
I have a bill here sponsored by Representative LaShawn Ford, and it has 2 quotes from Carter G. Woodson in it. So I'd like for everybody here to sign this petition. And if you have time, you can read the actual bill. This bill is to add the 3 key principles of the American Civil Rights Renaissance of the 1960s to the school calendar. The days visually affirm the 3 key principles of the movement. It's called the Days of Respect from the Jim Crow survivors' standpoint. So I'm going to pass it out.
Mama D, I don't want you to give a lecture. I love you. what I like for you, this to be is questions to Brother Gray. Yeah, yeah. So, go ahead.
My question to you, if these days of respect, one of his quotes is that if you, it's just two short paragraphs. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, said in 1933, if teachers do not constantly teach the African origin and contribution to the disciplines they teach, the thought of the inferiority of the Negro is drilled into him in almost every class he enters and in almost every book he studies. He also, the other quote was, Carter G. Woodson also said, if a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world and stands in danger of being exterminated.
Agreed, but wholeheartedly.
Do you think that this kind of stuff on the school calendar as part of civic history will change the brain and
Well, it does depend. I would say this very quickly. My dad would say it very, very quickly. Woodson, when we read, for example, and by the way, I did not mention very deliberately the Miseducation of the Negro, 1933. That was actually newspaper articles that Woodson had really put together in a book. There were two books like that he wrote over his lifetime. One has been published posthumously by the association, Darrell Scott, as we know. And this one was so hot fire that he said, I ain't gonna publish it. But the Miseducation Negro, he was frustrated. Again, a critique of the kind of elite blacks he saw even then that were beginning to divide through classism. How that plays out in the curriculum very quickly, and then I'll be quiet, 30 seconds really, is that teachers were already complaining during Negro History Week while Woodson was there saying, we haven't had time to get our legs under us in terms of the regular course of study. Since they come back in January, I don't know if we're going to be able to mount this. And Woodson's response, anytime somebody said that they were kind of didn't have enough time, well, I say I worked in a coal mine, so I mean, in other words, try harder. Those of us who are teachers, and I'm thinking about you, Mama Ife, I think about all the times we'd be at the house and you getting ready to go to work. Teaching is a hard job, and and for those of you who are now entering the profession with this digital stuff. It's enough to get through the curriculum with the standardized test. If you get the wrong teachers in, or the teachers who get fatigued or who are oppressed, which is why union work is still very important, you could pass something like that and it never make it to the teaching and learning practice. What we have to figure out is how to develop the spaces like this so that teachers can come in these spaces and continue to learn the tactics that will allow them to do that whether that resolution ever passes or not. And I think that was really Woodson's strength. Rather than try to take over institutions, let me build an institution and train people to be able to do that subversive work from a place we control completely. So I'm in full agreement. I'm just saying it's really about strategies on how to make it happen.
So in honor of Kobe Bryant in the game of basketball, the Wabash YMCA was opened in 1913. It had a gymnasium. And nobody knew at that time what the gym was for because we were baseball people. We rode horses. 2 years later, Woodson was living in the building with a gym. But it's ironic that today is Jackie Robinson's birthday. The man who was an all-around athlete who broke the color barrier, but at the All-Star game, when he was going blind in 1972, he pointed his finger up in the air and said that he would never be satisfied until we own the stadium, till we own the team, till we make the uniforms. Now, what a contradiction. Because they used him to dismantle what we already had. But it's further ironic that the game of basketball, as it was emerging, as it came out of Springfield College and a white man named Naismith, and his student Alonzo Stagg, who came to Chicago to be the athletic director to roll out athletics at the University of Chicago at the end of the 19th century. And when they opened the Wabash Y, where Carter Woodson lived 2 years after they opened the Y, somebody knew that Alonzo Stagg was over at the University in Chicago and brought him to the Y to introduce the game to the Negroes. And by 1920, black people in Chicago were dominating the game of basketball. And by 1926, the Jew man, Saperstein, took advantage of a conflict between the Savoy Big Five semi-pro team and created the Harlem Globetrotters. And the first six signees came out of Phillips High School in the building that Carter Woodson lived in. So this is important in our relationship to understanding sports and athletics, building stadiums and uniforms in this billion-dollar industry that we're losing out on. That Woodson, who wouldn't take a dime, sacrificed his life for.
How you doing, Bob?
Very good, thank you. And thank you for giving us this information today. My question, there's been a kind of an inescapable questioning that I've had recently about the origins of us, black people in this country, and some of the people who have been presented to us as our heroes in this effort to kind of become Americans, so to speak, right? There seems to be an ongoing dialectic between being African, which is what we were before, you know, we'll use African, and what we are to become, or what is the prescription that we're to become as a result of participating in this thing called America. And the word that keeps coming to me is hypocrisy. It's inescapable. And initially, I was pinning that on the American European, as the hypocrite because of his founding documents, liberty, justice for all, as he penned that he owns enslaved people, okay? But then I thought about our hand in the hypocrisy. For example, we helped them clear the indigenous people as they did their manifest destiny thing. And so, in short, there has been, in the dialectic, there has been a fight. We have had a fight that hasn't been defined, but we have essentially fought our oppressor to be with our oppressor. And if you look at it just in a logical sense, you know, of course, this is oversimplifying the historical details. And you say, well, you're free now. Wouldn't you leave? You've been oppressed. Wouldn't you leave? Okay? So what I'm saying is this. Every argument that we have, you could do the thing that's happening with the president. There's no moral basis. You can't have a conclusion because there's no morality in the country.
Let me take a stab at that, bro, because I hear that, and I think we probably all share this. Put it this way: we're not there yet. Meaning what? We don't have a consensus around how to view. See, this is the challenge with Woodson. Woodson came of age. His parents were literally enslaved. So for him, the thing right in front of me is to, Dr. Carrell used to talk about this. We got to fight our way back into humanity. not to prove it to white people as much as to prove it to ourselves. And so when he's asking for those letters, he said, I'm just gonna hold a mirror up. I want y'all to see who you are. Now, let me not get too deep into this. I know we don't have a lot of time, but when you say dialectic, I think about a kind of materialist reading of history. And we say morality, now I'm thinking culture. So the Western worldview is really a materialist worldview. So the concept of the European nation state is really anchored in this notion of property, real property. But then there's a conceptual property as well that exists in the form of individual rights. So in other words, I own myself. That's the notion of individual rights. And then I can extend my ownership beyond myself in material form. My land, my car, my person. And then, once we accept that cultural orientation, which is a materialist view of history, then anything we do to attempt to gain liberation is framed in materialist terms. You understand what I'm saying? So we just need to control this, we need to own this, but what we haven't yet grappled with is the conceptual universe we're dealing with. That's why appeals to citizenship can never get us where we think we want to go. And that frustration is going to keep coming.
Reverend Wright, you getting ready to go? Thank you, sir.
Baba J, we appreciate you, man. Thank you, Baba. See, he could do it a lot better than I could do it, because he'll give you a 3-word phrase and complain and get the whole thing together. No, seriously, I'm not just saying that. Baba J knows that. But anyway, let me cut it short and end with this. I think the struggle we're in now, and this isn't news to anybody in this room, because I think the people in this room represent the people who've done it better than anybody in the world, is to displace these Western notions of self and community. That's our first step. That's really the lesson we learned from Woodson. Once we've done that, we can then begin to puzzle through the rest of the challenge. But that in itself is a huge task, because once you've done that, you then can see the thing for what it is. This presidential thing, it's not even anything to talk about. In other words, because their thing is already coming apart. And so anyway, but I hope that at least gets us a little closer. We can't resolve it tonight, but I think we need to talk a whole lot more about that.
So because we don't have a lot of time left, and I only saw 3 people up here, and I promised we'd be out of this building at 9 o'clock, and we started on time. So if you have questions, do it quickly with the question, because I'm going to shut it down. We've had a great night. It's been a great lecture. So give me a question. Matter of fact, Greg, the way we're going to do this, do the question. We're going to internalize the question, and then we're going to try to sum it up. Okay, go ahead, brother. What's your question?
Okay. All right, greetings, Baba. We've been inundated with a lot of history, which goes through media, written by white authors, black scholars who are self-white identified, but none of this is productive in fighting white supremacy. How do we turn that narrative around and taking all this information to give to our students so they can go out and fight white supremacy?
Got your question. Yes, sir.
So I'm a student at DePaul, so I'm frequently around white people.
No, I'm saying.
So I have like a 2-part question, I guess. How have the methods of like black academic elites or like the black petite bourgeois remained similar to back in the day? How's it changed? And then the second part is, being a political science major, I have this like inner like conflict between trying to work through a electoral system that doesn't really work for black people, but how do you work with that and work outside of those confines in order to help the bulk of black people, not just the black people black people that are well-to-do?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Got your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vincent.
So my name is Vincent S. Williams. No, Dr. Carr from Howard University.
Yes.
I have a statement, and I'd like y'all to
No, Vince. Question.
Short statement.
Okay.
so that we'll get to the questions that they've asked.
Okay.
All right.
Vincent, this is me.
Yeah.
Question.
How do we get people to see that the problem isn't us? The problem is a notion of whiteness as a form of colonialism and imperialism created out of the imperial thrust of Europeans.
Yes, sir.
That's the question, which I think can help
Thank
answer a lot of
Thank
things.
you.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir. We got it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. My question is, what is our thought and what is our action that needs to be taken to stop using standardized testing and placement testing to gauge our kids and how intelligent they are?
Yes, sir.
So this is the last person, and I called out Chicago State, and she wasn't in the room at the time.
A little late.
This is Kim Delaney,
Professor?
who's the
Just a little bit late.
director or coordinator, or used to be at African American Studies at Chicago
So I
State.
got the bomb question, the
So
final
you got the
question.
last word. The last question. Last
Well,
question.
the whole thing. No, so I want to know, do you all have any concerns about all these new Black Studies programs? What are your cautions? What do you see happening with all of these new and expanding Black Studies programs? And then also, are you all aware of anything Carter G. Woodson said about back to Africa? Because now there seems to be attention on going back to Africa. I just left Liberia, and so I could see what happened with that back to Africa movement. And so I'm curious to know, did Carter G. Woodson have anything to say about that?
Thank you, Kim. Very quickly. Last verse. Yes, Woodson, often in his travels, because he was multilingual, Woodson would search for books on African history, and as we know, the Americans weren't publishing African, the French were, the Spanish were, Portuguese were. A lot of his collection at St. Emory are books that he translated on African history, going all the way back from Egypt to Egypt. He translated them from the European languages and published them in about 300 of those books that came out of Associated Publishers were books Woodson himself translated. So he was very invested in Africa, absolutely. The first question, dealing with the question of, this is what I would say about the first question and the question just before that, Vincent. Asking different questions gets us different answers. To me, that's really the function of curriculum work. It isn't the answer as much as it is the question. Once you ask a different, and I won't go, and can't go into it right now because it's almost time to go, but what we tried to do in Philadelphia, again, learning from many of the people in this room, this is really the function of the African-centered movement. In any subject, we would ask our high school students to ask two questions. Who are the Africans you're studying in this moment to other people, and who are they to each other? It seems like a simple question. But this is how that deals with standardized tests, because tests would really be an interruption in your study schedule. You can get a perfect SAT score if you're learning, I'm going to write down who you think I am to you. Because if you want to hear a child make a perfect accent in another language, ask them to make fun of somebody. In other words, it's the critical mind that enables you to draw a beat. No matter, this is some BS, and this is what happened. In 1776, y'all said it. Now, I know that more people fought for the British than fought for the Americans, and in Virginia, 30,000 people ran away. But on this test, you want to talk about them 5,000 people that thought they was going to get free with George Washington. That's your answer, and I move on. But they don't internalize that as their story. Once they've separated out who they are with each other, that's how you deal with the standardized test. Finally, the question of this teaching and learning practice in the HBCUs, Kim. I said HBCUs. You know why? I'm going to end with this. At 54, at a moment in this country when not only is higher education under assault, all education is under assault, and the appeal is being made, young brother from DePaul, to the class interests of a tiny group whose function is to represent the rest of us and then who are rewarded with just a little bit better quality of life. Somewhere in the last year, I have passed personally, and I'll say this to y'all in public, I have passed caring about anything other than being in community with the students I come in community with in the communities and get my check every 2 weeks. That's going to translate for me to a large shift in the energy I'm devoting to Howard University and putting that energy for whatever time I got left, a day, a year, 10 years, however long, to being in these spaces. Because I think what Woodson showed, no, I'm very serious about that, because the future isn't in Black Studies programs. These white folks then figured out they're going to reward these Negroes and try to make them. The future isn't in white newspapers trying to tell us that we too are in American history. The future is in the way Woodson did it. Woodson worked at Howard for a year and a half. He was a dean. Then he said, this is a waste of my time. He resigned, and if Woodson had kept the trajectory of black college, he's also the dean of West Virginia State College. If he had kept that trajectory, we would not be sitting here tonight. So some of us are going to have to turn away from those jobs. But when we do, that means the community is going to have to show that this sacrifice, because sacrifice is his middle name. And I say sacrifice, not sacrifice in terms of soul, sacrifice in terms of they're going to turn my lights off. And I got about 60,000 books between storage and my apartment that got to have a home. And I'm not going to put them at a white school. We need some land, we need some buildings, we need a place, and then we're going to wage war, and we're going to win. But I'm telling you right now, I'm getting ready to walk away from this Negro college, because these bourgeois Negroes at the top of that food chain have just about...
He ain't got permission yet.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Dr. Evans
gave permission.
Dr. Evans, this is the elder
So y'all see the thing
intervention.
blow up in D.C.?
This is
Y'all
the
know
elder-
what happened.
This is the elder intervention. He's getting ready.
No.
He told
Look
me.
at him.
Yeah. But let me say this, Dr. Evans. This is really.
brother.
Hold on. I'd like everybody to kind of leave collectively. We started collectively, and we need to have a little African order when we close out a program.
Well, before you close,
And-
can
and
I take
so-
15 seconds? I want to thank you. I want to thank the center. I want to thank the fund. I want to thank everybody. Please, y'all don't understand. These are the things that keep us going. I'm from the bottom of my soul. Thank you all. Thank you kindly. Thank you, brother.
I want to thank Dr. Evans for allowing me to have a little input on this, but this is her house. She is the leader.
Yes.
And when we're talking about institutions, this institution is 54 years going on September 8th. And what we need is to keep the word going, to send students here, to call our admissions office. This is a gold mine. 157 of our master's students in inner city studies have gone on to earn PhDs and are teaching in colleges and universities all over the country and all over the world. This is a gold mine that's still here under Dr. Evans' leadership. So this is one of our public taxpayer institutions that we have a lot of influence over, and we need to keep it. Dr. Evans, you want to say anything on the way out? She's so modest.
Just thank you, Dr. Carr. I've got so many books I need to read. I just took pictures of all of them so that I can go find them. Thank you. Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Carolyn. This was wonderful. Thank you all for being here.